God, why is it Billy gets to talk about Christopher Eccleston and I have to do Matt Smith? I want to do Christopher Eccleston. It's not bloody fair.
Oh, if you're, like me, a huge fan of Matt Smith's seminal tenure in the TARDIS, then you'll know that we're in the minority. It's one of the hardest things in the world, being a fan of an era of Doctor Who that's so constantly overlooked. We said goodbye to Matt Smith just over a year ago, and then again back in August. Since then, the quite rightly lauded Peter Capaldi has taken over the keys to the TARDIS, but the BBC seems to have washed its hands of Doctor Number 11, even going as far as skipping the master copies of Series 7. Thankfully, since then recovered by Philip Morris or Ian Levine or something, I don't know. Stephen Moffat has since stated that the casting of Peter Capaldi was essentially an apology and a vindication to everyone who complained about Matt Smith's casting on all the forums, message boards and blogs since his first appearance at Doctor Who Confidential in 2009. And sod it, I think I'm going to review Rose.
So, finally, you'd think we'd have done this by now. 9 eras of FiveWhoFans, and this one hasn't even done a Rose review yet. Christ on a bike. Where do we start with Rose, though? How does it rank with all the other series openers?
Third, and not my opinion, scientific fact.
But no, honestly, how can we even compare them? I don't think it's any secret that I, and a lot of other people, think that the 11th Hour is the strongest opener the series has had since its revival. But what does the 11th Hour have to prove? That Matt Smith is the best thing since sliced bread? Come on, he could do that in his sleep. Rose had to sell Doctor Who to a new audience from the word go. It had to convince the BBC that Doctor Who was still a seismic force, in spite of its age. And less remembered, of course, it was also a challenge to the Saturday evening primetime slot, which, at the time, was dominated by nothing but pop idols, Ants, Dex and Bruce Forsyths. Since then, though, you've got your Robin Hoods, your Merlins, your Primevals, and probably more, I don't know, I couldn't be asked to do any research. On a personal note, it's probably worth mentioning what life was like back in 2005. I was young, I had a better hairline, I had about a dozen Big Finish audio adventures, I'd not taken the jump to upgrade my Doctor Who VHS collection to DVD.
Now I'll never know if I was right.
And was feeling pretty ambivalent towards the new series. Chris Eccleston was in it. Yeah, he was pretty good in Second Coming, but, I mean, why not cast Alan Davis or Bill Nighy? Billy Piper? Really? Now I just know that the BBC aren't going to take this seriously. Seeing the few glimpses of filming in the Metro was, I don't know how to describe it, just a bit confusing and disheartening, really. I think prior to the release of the episode, the only thing I really cared about was how they'd tie in the Eighth Doctor. Are we going from the TV movie, Zagreus, the Gallifrey Chronicles? Help me out here. When Rose finally came out, or maybe we should say when Rose was leaked online and my friends and I gathered around a CRT monitor to see if it was all worth it, a viewing completely unmarred by Graham Norton, so we could enjoy Noel Clarke getting eaten by a dustbin and the slightly peculiar use of the original Delia Derbyshire theme music. It was a bit of a mixed bag, you know, good performances. I had no idea Billy Piper was such a capable actress, Ruddy Nora. But personally, I just felt a bit shortchanged. Sci-fi had moved on and become bigger, bolder, better, and we had Battlestar Galactica now, and Farscape. Rose just sort of came across as a big dollop of the mundane. When it was first shown on TV, I didn't catch it until about 40 minutes in. I'd missed pretty much all of it. I wandered downstairs, saw the last 5 minutes, and then next time on Doctor Who, core! Space! You're joshing! And look, metal spiders!
A big massive face in a jar!
Oh, okay, maybe I rushed my original opinion. Also, that theme tune was amazing. It's probably best to go back and have another look. In this review, I really wanted to say something bold and outrageous, some big dramatic sentiment like,
"Without Rose, Doctor Who wouldn't exist."
Or,
"It's overlooked, but Rose is quite possibly the quintessential episode of Doctor Who."
Or,
"This might just be my favourite episode."
I wanted to say that, but the words just won't come out properly. Right now, though, I think I can pretty comfortably say that I really like Rose. It's a great introduction to what we'd all eventually refer to as New Who. Rose and the Doctor are perfectly realised. Chemistry? You bet, tons of it. Fireworks even. Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper work from the off. How? It must be witchcraft. The secondary characters are the most bold and colourful that Doctor Who has ever seen. Jackie Tyler and Clive, the conspiracy theorist, are just so watchable, with respected performances from Camille Coduri and Mark Benton that just tingle with energy and vibrancy. Noel Clarke's Mickey is a bit ish, being relegated to a dog's body for the opening act and a gurning plastic monster for the second. Arguably, later performances and a return to the character later on in the series give his token boyfriend character plenty of substance, but for the most part, the attention is all on Rose. Pay attention to Rose. Rose. It's all about Rose. You can tell because it's in the title.
Wait for it, wait for it, wait for it. Right there! Boom! Rose, right in the titles! Right there!
Again, I really wanted to say,
Rose is the framework on which modern Doctor Who is built.
And I really wanted it to stay there, but I honestly can't bring myself to commit to that either. Rose might not be the gold standard for modern Doctor Who, but it is the bedrock on which the majority of the Russell T Davies era was built from. The formula of really well realised characters, the backdrop of Doctor Who, the people, for once they felt just really real. Perhaps it's a nod to Russell's love for soap opera, but they were a dramatic departure from the slightly stoic characters of early Who, whose moral relativism is what many of us spend days soliloquying over in blogs and on message boards, compared to the more mercenary and blunt characters in later series of classic Doctor Who. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, and no doubt people are going to complain.
How dare you! Not all characters in classic Doctor Who!
But there's something to be said about having characters like this. The Jackie Tylers and Clives of the world become far more relatable than your Eric Cleagues or your Sabel and Glitzes or your Impossible Girls. And having that level of pedestrian familiarity, from my perspective at least, has the twofold effect of making me feel more sympathetic towards characters who might otherwise have been background dressing and provided a pretty great launchpad for the supernatural. All of a sudden, it felt as if what was happening in Doctor Who could be happening down the road, up the park, to people you know, like your aunt who keeps flirting with the postman. The sci-fi laser fights of old Doctor Who, again I'm paraphrasing, become replaced with human life and human tragedy. The juxtaposition of both the mundane and the fantastic became the bread and butter of Doctor Who for God knows how long. It works really well in Rose, but dare I say it, I think Aliens of London and World War III might have done it better. The two-parter featured and lavished attention over its entire ensemble, while the glut of attention given to the title character in this opening episode makes it, a bit Marmite-y and makes it plod along in places. The glimpses of the Doctor we see in the opening two acts are tantalising, and like Rose, we want to go through the looking glass and see who he is and the world he lives in. Of these glimpses, worth noting is the sequence where Rose first enters the TARDIS, arguably one of the best bigger on the inside reveals, and the shamefully and far too forgotten Turn of the Earth speech, which is, quite frankly, one of the all-time greatest monologues in Doctor Who history. Go home, Pandorica speech. That was all about the big I am. David Tennant having a Benny with the devil? Kid stuff. Before this point in the story, Christopher Eccleston had been playing the action hero, the cheeky chappie in your living room. Here, we finally get our first proper feel of Christopher Eccleston as the Doctor. It's a quiet and subdued moment, full of energy, intensity, ferocity even, and yet profound, enigmatic, and empathetic in a way. I don't normally hold speeches to such ransom. They're little moments I enjoy, these little soliloquies making broad emotional strokes, but I don't think without a scene like this, and without the gravitas of Christopher Eccleston's performance, it would have worked. I don't think I'd have been as sold on Doctor Who back then as I ended up being. Everything else, the mention of the then embryonic mythos, the Time War, the Shadow Proclamation, would I have cared as much for them if it wasn't being sold on the character at that moment? I don't know. On reflection, I don't think it's possible to adequately review Rose without looking back on it with rose, tinted glasses. Back then, I thought it was so-so. An alright start that built into something altogether a bit more for. Looking back now, I dunno. Good start. Really cracking speech, though.
Oh yeah, and the Autons were in it too. Keep forgetting about that. Alright, bye.
There's an old earth saying, a phrase of great power and wisdom and consolation to the soul in times of need.
Get in the church!